Hi, Robin.
Hi.
How
How
are
are you?
you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm gonna make it full. Okay. How
I
you
have
doing?
I have a fluffy little puppy that's joining me
Oh,
tonight.
I love that. Mine's too big to get on my lap. Forget it.
We just got her. So far
Is
so
that
good.
Sunny?
Hi, Will.
Is that Sunny?
Here she is. Yup.
Oh, that's so cute.
So she I don't know, something outside spooked her. So she came right in and came up on mommy. So all is good.
I see another puppy in the background here, Jean.
Yes,
Yeah, her name's That's a picture. No.
beautiful.
Say hi. Say hi. Say hi.
Oh, so cute.
Oh, and there's Spike, my love. Sunny's cousin.
Oh, goodness.
Mhm.
We got the puppies. We have
Aw.
an orientation that was going on, and some of the women that were there want to come into this. So we're going to try to coordinate getting them over here with us.
Wonderful.
Yes, it's all good. We have a nice group tonight.
Yeah.
Dawn, if that is your hair, that is really beautiful.
I
If you're,
wish it were my hair.
Yeah.
I
Hey,
wish it
cousin
were.
Dawn.
I'm jealous.
Hey, how are you, Will?
I'm good, cousin Dawn. How you doing?
Ducky.
Yes, so my email is back on for those of you who didn't know, my recall was hacked. And
yeah.
I've spent 2 days trying to get it recalibrated, and it actually stumped Microsoft. So it was a long couple of days, but we got it. I think we've got it fixed now. So these hackers, I don't know. It's probably like a high school student that would just wanted to learn how to do it, but really messed up my schedule for a couple days. Hello
Rotten
there.
kids.
Yeah. We have, I'll give them a couple more minutes. We've got a nice group in. I don't want to start too early without them. Oh, Lori, this is my new puppy. This is Sunny.
So cute.
Thank you.
How old?
She's going on 13 weeks now.
How long have you had her?
For about 3.
Okay,
So it's been fun.
I'm sure.
A lot of
Like
work.
having a toddler around.
It is, and that was one of my prerequisites. I told my husband, we weren't gonna get a pet until my youngest was out of diapers and whatever. And now that he is, that I had no more excuses. So we finally bit the bullet.
What kind of dog is he?
She's a mini golden doodle.
Oh.
So she doesn't shed. But I'm wondering if she's really mini because she's growing so fast. I'm starting to be suspicious.
She's adorable.
Thank you.
What's her name?
Sunny.
Sunny.
So I love the sunshine and the beach and all that kind of stuff. And so John, my husband had given me a teddy bear when we first started dating, and I named it Sunny because it just was so sweet and cute. And as soon as I saw her, she looked just like Sunny. So Sunny it is. Okay. Oh, Willie, you're mute.
For some reason, it's not letting me change my name. 'cause
Yes,
my
I
name's
see
not
you're Amy Soricelli.
Mhm. I'm not Amy.
I was gonna say, are you on a different device?
No.
So Willa, when you talk, you're Amy, but when you, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. With Sunny,
Oh, Kim.
Kim, when you talk, it says Dress for Success, Northern New Jersey.
Okay. And then, and Willa's Amy. I'm telling you, there is like a digital full moon somewhere. I don't know what's going on here. Let me see if I could change that. Maybe. Okay, I got Kim now.
You do.
Okay. All right. Oh, here's an oh, Amy Soricelli's coming back in, but I think that's Willa. I'm telling you, I was joking and I was talking to the Microsoft person to fix my email today. And I was like, it's a full moon. It's gotta be. And she's like, no, really, it is. Like, so I don't know what's going on. All right. So it's 7:05. I want to be mindful of our time. I'll continue to let people in as as they come into the waiting room, but I want to get moving because we have a lot of really important things to talk about tonight. So hello and welcome everyone. I am Kim Iozzi. I'm the Executive Director of Dress for Success Northern New Jersey. And my co-host is Willa Edgerton Chisler, otherwise known as Amy. She is the CEO of Symphony Strategies, and she is our Steps to Success program coordinator, and she's also a volunteer on our inclusion task force. I want to thank all of you so much for supporting our Allies for Change. We've got a great group of women here tonight that are coming from some really fantastic organizations in our area. The first I'd like to introduce is Argelis Hernandez. She's a social worker and community service supervisor for the Center for Hope and Safety in Rochelle Park. Kim Spandenberg is a CEO of DAISY. Now, I used to work in Newton, so I am very familiar with DAISY. It is the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Assault Intervention Services located in Newton, in Sussex County. And lastly, Robin Hughes, who is the Crisis Response Team Project Manager at Jersey Battered Women's Services in Morristown. So welcome, ladies. We are really excited to have you attend this monthly fireside chat. Hashtag everyone knows someone, which focuses on domestic violence, and awareness. Domestic violence thrives in silence. And so tonight I'm wearing my purple. Willa was gracious enough to remind me that today is Wear Purple Thursday as a way to subtly raise awareness for domestic violence. But to be able to support and help victims and survivors and to prevent domestic violence in the future, we all really need to talk about it. And to talk about it, we need others to understand fully what it is. So we want to have a fully informed conversation about what domestic violence requires from us to understand exactly what it is, even more than just the physical abuse, and why just leaving isn't so simple for survivors. I'm going to kick off each question with one person and then provide the opportunity for other panelists to add their perspective. So the first question that I wanted to start with is really to develop an understanding for us here tonight that domestic violence can come in many forms. It can be emotional, psychological, physical, obviously. One isn't just a number. The hashtag everyone knows someone. One is not a number, it's a someone, it's a family member, a neighbor, a coworker. How would you define domestic violence, and what are some of the myths surrounding domestic violence? I'm going to start with Kim, and then we'll go to the other panelists.
Thanks, Kim. I appreciate it. One of the important concepts that I find when we're talking about domestic violence is the use of coercive control by the person that is doing the abusing. One of the great myths about domestic violence is that it's about anger. It's about being angry. It's about losing control. And what we know from the research and from stories from victims is that it really is about trying to gain control of the person that is being abused, and that it's a conscious choice. It's a type of coercive control in order to keep someone either in a relationship with you, doing the things that you want them to do. So the myth being that it's about anger. So anger management courses are not the proper intervention for those who use domestic violence against others. It really is a very specified class that talks about control and really looks at the societal picture as to why domestic violence happens. It's not just a one-time incident that has to do with anger, but has to do with how society supports hierarchy in society, how it supports men being at most of the time having more power than women, although we recognize that domestic violence happens to both men and to women. But we also need to look at that societal picture of where someone has more control over the other, and that the community helps to support that control.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Argelis, am I saying that correctly? That is such a pretty name, but I just want to make sure I'm not hacking it.
It's okay. It's pronounced Argelis.
Argelis. Beautiful. So would you like to weigh in on that?
Sure. So domestic violence, pretty much summed up is abusive behavior that's part of a systematic pattern of power and control, pretty much piggybacking off what Kim was sharing. And it could happen within different elements of a household, throughout different elements of generational abuse, utilizing that systematic pattern. And so one of the myths that I can include is people can assume that children aren't affected by domestic violence, or grandparents aren't affected by domestic violence. If there's an intimate relationship there, they still can be victims of the abuse, even if they weren't directly targeted.
Makes sense. Okay. Robin?
Well, I'm not going to repeat the actual definition again, but it is a pattern of controlling behavior. And to piggyback about it not being an anger management issue, I will stress that, because people who use power and control in their relationships usually really control their anger in the world. They're not out there. They control it when they go to work. They control it when there's a line at the bank. They only use that power and control abusively in their homes, which makes it a totally different thing than anger management. A couple of myths about domestic violence, I'm just going to touch on a couple, that it's only physical, that a domestic violence has to be physical to be recognized as domestic violence, which is not true. That it only happens to women. A lot of people like, oh, well, men could never be victims of abuse, which is a myth. It only happens to lower income people. That got, again, a huge myth. That It's easy for a victim to get out if they choose to. Why can't they just leave? Right? Why don't victims just leave? That is a myth that if a person could leave, they would leave, is truly what that's saying. So there's a lot of myths around domestic violence. And it just depends on who you're talking to, which one they choose to believe. But it is a pandemic nonetheless.
Wow. Kim, can I add something to your question?
Yes.
Because I think, Robin, you just picked up on something. You mentioned the word pandemic. And we are in the midst of a pandemic. And we know that, the governor's stay-at-home orders and everything that it had to do with this virus, victims found themselves very isolated. So, I'd like for you to share, and we'll start off with Rob. We'll pick up where you left off, Robin. How has the pandemic and COVID-19 impacted, the victims and survivors of domestic violence?
Well, let's start with the COVID. That alone instilled a fear in people, in all people, not just people living with domestic violence. So that's a new layer, right? Because victims of domestic violence didn't have that layer. Now, we felt the pressures of that, even if we weren't in that type of a relationship. But you hit the nail right on the head. That isolation piece, when we were in the midst of that, not leaving our homes, not going to work, those escape routes that normally were accessible to victims were no longer there. The fear of going out into the community, to shelters, if that was something you even thought about before, you were not even thinking about it now because of the fear of COVID itself and the fear of being homeless. It also added a bunch of layers with homelessness insecurity, economic insecurities, just lack of resources, all of those fears. And then add in the increased use of drug and alcohol, which also played into an increase in domestic violence, because we saw that alcohol consumption went through the roof during COVID, people being home all day drinking and using drugs.
And they kept the liquor stores open.
Absolutely. You couldn't get COVID in the liquor store, but you could get it at your office. So yeah, but all of those were just compounding layer upon layer of a victim who's already experiencing layers and layers of suppression. And it really made it much more difficult for them to reach out and want to get help.
Argelis, am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. How COVID has affected domestic violence as well, piggybacking off Robin, the lack of resources, and then going into that big element of how unemployment shot up and how the access of unemployment increased, which was beneficial in a way. But there were many individuals, especially perpetrators, who took advantage of that situation when they were collecting a normal amount of unemployment on top of the, I believe it was a surplus of funds. So that was, gave them ample time to stay at home. So victims who were even trying to contact shelters, contact counseling services, contact liaisons, anywhere that they could possibly, seek some type of guidance, it was hard for them to find a place to go alone and be able to share, having their abusers share that home space with them, because either some were working from home or they were on unemployment.
Yeah. And what did you see, Kim, at Daisy?
The same as the others, but I think another challenge for survivors was that even those who were receiving services prior to the pandemic, service provision completely changed. We were at a situation where clients were not coming to our center for face-to-face counseling services, even if they could get there, because of shutdown orders. So they were then receiving services over the phone or through telehealth. And in some situations, survivors flourished under those conditions and were okay with the telehealth that helped with transportation issues, childcare issues. But for others, it was definitely not the same. The same connection wasn't there. So just as we had to adjust different ways of communication, survivors, as both of my colleagues have said, were feeling so isolated, and then not having supports in the same manner compounded that feeling of desperation and isolation. I do want to give a positive shout out to all the domestic violence programs in New Jersey who pivoted very quickly to be able to provide services ongoing to survivors through the pandemic. But we do recognize that it was changed up so much for survivors that they had to adjust to that as well.
Yeah, what did you see? I'm going to stay with you a minute, Kim, about that, about victims facing additional barriers, because we know that with the domestic violence comes other isms. So the sexism, the racism, it's an intersectional issue, right?
Definitely.
And so what are some of the barriers you saw in preventing someone from leaving an abusive relationship?
Definitely the economic downturn has been an extra barrier. We were seeing more survivors losing housing situations. So even if they were able to get into a situation where they could leave their abuser, perhaps through a restraining order, let's say, in the past, they may have gotten a restraining order and remained in their home. But because of the economic downturn, sometimes they would get the restraining order and there was no home to return to, or a home, they were having trouble making the bills. So that was a definite barrier. And then when we talk about racism, this pandemic was happening at the same time where we were having a divide in our nation, and we started to have an awakening about racism in America, and shamelessly how even the women's movement and us as domestic violence programs had not always done the right thing when it came to looking at different cultures and races. And I think that became an additional barrier, not only for survivors of color or of different cultures, feeling kind of that barrier of, can I reach out to my local domestic violence agency? Can I trust them? Will I be accepted during this time of terrible divide? And then also with our advocates who wanted to be allies and maybe not knowing how to do that, or dealing with their own remorse and coming to acceptance of the fact that they hadn't done everything that they could have for people of color and in other cultures. So I do think that it's taken time for us to rebuild trust within the community, to be honest about the fact that the women's movement did not work for everyone, that a lot of what the women's movement was doing was to helping white women of privilege to get ahead, but they weren't looking back to help others that did not have certain privileged status. So I think we're still recovering from that, and it's still a barrier for domestic violence victims. And I hope that my organization and sister organizations continue to work on those issues.
Okay. Argelis?
Yes, definitely what we've seen was an increase throughout the pandemic of the distrust in the judicial system. Throughout different cultural groups, when it came to the privileged cultural groups, it was fear of connections of their counter privileged part, that it was their perpetrator, of having connections, whether in the police system, with a judge, with prosecutor's office, and not being able to get heard, not even to get the appropriate legal documentation, approvals, child support, custody, you name it. And with minorities and disprivileged groups, it was the main focus of doing that initial steps of collecting police reports and reaching out to their nearest police station to begin those steps of protecting themselves legally and having that distrust, because as we've seen throughout the pandemic and even way before, a lot of issues with the police system and how it is operated, and how the systematic form of placing individuals in jail, of how it is very disproportionate between different cultures and different races, has definitely left a mark in women and men to want to come forward, whether fear of placing their significant other in a place of danger, or themselves believing that they're not going to be heard or placed in trouble for trying to speak out. So we've really tried to concentrate on education and making sure that individuals are aware of their legal rights in domestic violence situations.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you. Robin, what have you seen? Thank you. Kelly.
I'm going to piggyback a little bit on the police, because that's really my lane as far as what I do. And I have to say that I think it really hindered victims during the pandemic, because police departments weren't running the way they normally did. Some departments wouldn't even let victims inside their lobbies. So they were talking to victims in parking lots. They were connecting them to services, in their cars. They weren't entering victims' homes and doing, the investigation work that they would have normally done because of COVID. And then if you add in those biases and that historical, what we witnessed during COVID with the police officers and people of color and all of that turmoil, added barriers to people wanting to go to the police for help too. Right? So there was a lot going on, but I will say I did see some departments become very creative in trying to help victims of domestic violence, even though they were running in a system that had changed so drastically because of COVID. And I did see a lot of police officers step up to the plate and be thinking outside the box to try to get people connected to resources. However, if that historical bias and that historical unacceptance by victims was there in the beginning, it certainly was still there during COVID. And it did put a big barrier up for them getting services for those departments that were doing it historically anyway, right? But for the other departments, they did great work. And we have to be able to praise, as well as that's how change happens when bad things happen, because then we learn from those experiences. But there were so many obstacles during COVID that people had to overcome to get to services and to get to the help that they needed. So.
Robin, that kind of ties into a question that, I wanted to focus on, and it's ultimately, domestic violence doesn't have to just be, a certain type of a woman or a certain age of a woman or social economic class, religion, whatever. One of the things that I think might have been a barrier is, how do we shift the culture away from blaming the victim instead of blaming the perpetrator? And, you were talking about, the barriers just with COVID and everything else. How do we as a society shift away from being victim blamers?
It's so interesting that one question always resonates with me, because I meet victims in police stations, and victims do such a great job of self-blaming anyway, right? It's always their fault, like what they could have done differently. Like they're cemented in that place anyway. And I always remind victims, and I remind people, that they're there as a result of someone else's actions, not theirs. They're there because someone else acted inappropriately, and they are seeking help for someone else's bad behavior. Societally, we need to hold batterers accountable. We need to have more programs that specifically address batterer behavior. And I think we'll take bail reform, which I know is a very touchy subject. And we all know what bail reform is. People are released. There's no one held on bail anymore. So you take a perpetrator is sometimes released before the victim is done signing the paperwork in the police station, right? And they're still being put at risk because they're going right back to that relationship or that coercive control to get that person back, because there's no accountability in place. We really have to start there. Instead of asking, why isn't a victim leaving? Why aren't we holding batterers accountable on every single level? Judicially, in police departments, we have to keep them accountable. And there has to be money to be able to have these programs. And again, it comes down to funding. There's got to be and education is key, right? We need to talk about it. We need to have awareness around it. But definitely batterer accountability is very important.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Kim, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think in these situations too, it goes back to education and how we're educated even at a very young age. We see at schools, we tell young girls, how to dress, what they can wear. Most dress codes at schools are focused towards young women, not towards men. We talk about victims and women needing to take self-defense classes and carry mace. We teach women to stay in groups together. Don't go somewhere alone. Don't be jogging, by yourself in the evening at dusk or dawn. Don't drink too much when you're out. Instead of asking the question or starting the education about how do we change the behavior of people that are going to abuse or take advantage of those situations. So right from a young age, we teach our children how young girls need to keep themselves safe, instead of talking about how do we teach people that want to use control or abuse against others not to do that. So I think it's, again, another systemic issue that starts very young.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Arliss, anything?
Sure. To stem from what Robin was saying before, mandating training for important systems in our society that work very closely in how these situations go for victims seeking safety, making sure that, police officers are well trained in domestic violence, they're advocates at courts, prosecutor's office, judge training, to ensure fairness in all, and also piggybacking off Kim, making sure that the education starts from, when children are young, to understand what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, healthy relationship building, what is toxic relationships, breaking generational barriers, because it could also stem from, arranged marriages, keeping a form of compliance within a generational family figure of women tending to the home and men working. And if anyone tries to, shift that around, it can lead to issues, and keeping quiet about it. So a lot of training, education around that to uplift the victims and stop the shaming.
Right, right. We got a lot of work to do.
There is a lot of work, because, to what I'm hearing, it's not just those, the violence that we're talking about with the police and protecting. We're also talking about how abuse leaves those invisible bruises that we can't see, right? So the credit, the financial well-being, the emotional well-being. And talk to us about, and I'll start with you, Arliss, about the economy and the financial well-being when we're talking about a survivor of domestic violence. How does the economy affect all of that? How do you see that?
It affects it absolutely greatly, because, like you mentioned, it talks about the other side and kind of picking up the pieces and moving forward. And sometimes we tend to forget that the victims who are leaving these abusive situations are leaving their household. So somebody who could originally been in a household of 4 is now in a household of, let's say, 3, and those other 2 could be children. And unknowingly, what if they were denied education? What if they were denied being able to seek work? And if they need to find an apartment, what if they were denied ever being able to get a credit card? They have no credit score. The economy is it's so unbalanced in a sense of work minimum wage. We know in this country, or each state has, different tolerances for their minimum wage, but then rent is sky high. and just to potentially like get loans, own a home, try to get a car, there's so much obstacles through it that someone who could have been denied of these simple stepping stones of trying to seek independence in this country was deteriorated from that, you know, having to start from scratch and needing to immediately have a shelter, have a place to raise their children, have them where they can go to school and continue to grow. It's extremely difficult in the economy with the imbalance of what we receive in payment and how much it costs to live. It doesn't equal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The $7.15 an hour is not going to get it. We know that, right? That's for sure. Robin, your thoughts?
Also, to navigate these systems that we throw people in trauma into, whether it's Office of Temporary Assistance, you know, welfare, Section 8 housing, all of these things, these systems are very, very difficult to navigate, even if you aren't in trauma. So I think as far as support systems, to try to do that, because economically we can't survive without help, right? Also, I think the system is almost designed in a way that people will fail, because you're asking people in trauma, come to me, show me a sustainability plan, show me how you can maintain this if I give you this, right? But they can't yet, right? They just know they can't not survive because they have 2 kids that they need to take care of, right? We need to be able to really help them through these processes to be economically stable, to be able to move forward safely. There's a lot of work that has to be done to make this an easier process and less traumatic, because it is very traumatic with people in trauma trying to become economically stable to succeed.
I remember I am a child of a survivor of domestic violence. My mom was a battered woman, and I remember her trying to navigate the social services through the Catholic mission, through the Salvation Army, through welfare, through the courts, and trying just to make sure that we had something to eat and a place to live, and that we were safe. And it's not easy while you're worried about if you're going to live, because somebody's trying to kill you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Kim, your thoughts?
Yes. So having come from my prior life as a director of a housing authority, I understand fully how complicated that system is and how broken it is. And for someone not being a victim of domestic violence, it's difficult to navigate and to understand all of the nuances and where to find housing and so forth. So I get it. I do. Now in my Dress for Success hat, I think I feel that we can do a lot more, or at least I can do a lot more than what I could as a director of a housing authority to support the women. So what I would like to know is what we can do to help. What can we do to take action as an organization, as individuals? What is one thing that we can do to make a difference, to make a dent in the situation? Because we covered so much, and you know, for all of us tonight, like, what is one thing we can all do, and what can we do as an organization to support the women? I will start with Robin.
Well, you know what I'm going to say, though. We need to keep the dialogue going. We can't just talk about it today. We can't just talk about it during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We need to talk about it every single opportunity that comes up. It's through education and awareness that change happens, right? It doesn't happen in a silo. And showing concern as individuals. If we need to ask questions, if we see something, say something, right? I'm concerned about you. I saw something alarming. Can we talk about it and show that you care and you're concerned for another human? Because there are resources available, but if we don't talk about it, then we're not doing anything to make a change. So I am a huge advocate of talking about it every single opportunity. Don't miss an opportunity to talk about domestic violence.
Is there any way that we can better train our volunteers to recognize it. I'm thinking, we have women who volunteer in our boutique to suit women. That may be the first time they come in contact with a woman, and probably seeing more of the physical signs. But is there a way to like recognize it as someone who's just coming in contact with someone maybe for the first time?
Well, I know every agency does trainings, right? They have training people who come out and will sit down with your organization and talk about the signs, talk about what they can do. I know our organization does. We come out and we have a professional trainer who will come out and do just that. We go to corporations because, I mean, think about it. We've had murders in major companies, and their employees need to be aware of those signs. To be able to make that change. So absolutely, training is always available. Education is always available.
Okay, thank you.
My hairstylist, she has a question board that do you need to talk to me about, or do you need a phone number? Because your hairstylist is like your doctor, right? You tell them everything, and she has like 5 questions plus a phone number to call and cards in case you need to go and talk to somebody. I think to your point, Robin, you got to talk about it.
Yep.
You have to talk about it.
I love that. Arhilis, what do you think? What's one thing that we can do either as individuals or as an organization?
So as individuals, I think the power of social media is great and is definitely a tool on our side in these situations. And just with one share, getting a lot of people to like something, view, you can reach anybody through the use of social media. And with our organization specifically, we always are uploading, different forms of information, education, alongside, anything that we're doing on the day-to-day. So anybody who may come across our page, somebody who may know somebody, and they could just kind of show up and, could really, highlight something that they're wanting to, just kind of get more information on, or either helping a friend or something that they may be going through personally. It's a very powerful tool. So definitely taking advantage of that. And as an organization, it's so important to be involved in meetings in council within your county, your town, your state, anything where there's representation, where anybody can express their needs for the clients that are, anything in regards to housing, funding for transportation, childcare. If these are things that we're experiencing barriers, we need to be able to voice them in these council meetings where our representatives are hearing what, the community is needing. So they hopefully can take action on it, or we can vote who will be willing to be an advocate for us.
Right. Makes sense. Thank you. Kim.
Just a little reinforcement of what was already said. Bystander accountability, I feel, is so important. If you do see something, say something, intervene when people are talking in a negative light about victims and victim blaming. And you could do that in a way that is approachable and not negative. Resource connection is so important. But speaking about, recognizing it in the workplace, or what could the volunteers at Dress for Success look for? There you can look for decreased self-esteem, questions about, do you miss work frequently? If someone comes in and talks about not being able to hold a job, these could be real openers for conversation of, tell me about why that's happening. Because oftentimes for domestic violence victims, their job is interfered with by the abuser, because that is a form of being able to control them. So being able to recognize that, and then if you work with women and you recognize the signs, being supportive of them, being a listening, someone that they can talk to, and then if need be, going with them to HR to try to get protections in place while they are at work, so that they feel safe at work, and the business not taking disciplinary action against them for things such as lost time at work or frequent phone calls from an abuser.
Right, that makes sense. Before we finish up, I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't highlight each of your organizations. We mentioned you guys and where you worked, but I'd like maybe the audience to understand what organizations you're with and what services you offer, who you serve, so that if they do know anybody in your service area, that we can reach out and let you know and get the help if we need it. So Kim, I'm going to start with you since you just finished, so I'm not letting you off the hot seat yet.
Okay, so from Daisy in Sussex County, we have a 24-hour hotline. So if you do know someone who needs help, the best way for them to get help in Sussex County is to call 973-875-1212. That helpline is answered 24 hours a day. We provide a myriad of services: safe housing, transitional housing. We have a grant right now due to the pandemic to help people to get into permanent housing. So there is ability to do that. We have supportive counseling services, which is basically education about domestic violence and sexual violence. We have clinical counseling services for people that are suffering from trauma and complex trauma. We have legal advocates on staff. We have domestic violence response teams where we can meet individuals at police stations when a domestic violence incident has occurred, and sexual assault response teams so that we can meet victims at the hospital under sexual assault situations. And Daisy does have a program for those who use force. So it's called Decide to Live Without Violence. So we do, as well as help victims and survivors, help those who perpetrate violence as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I think maybe while I move on, I'm going to go to Robin next, but maybe can you put your hotline number in the chat so that people can have it, or maybe your website as well. Robin, you want to talk about your...
I'm going to piggyback right on what Kim said. So we have a 24-hour hotline. I'm in Morris County. We're JBWS, but I wanted to clarify our name. It's no longer Jersey Battered Women's Service. Okay, that 2 years ago we dropped that. It's just JBWS. And the reason is, when we first started, it was developed out of a women's movement, right? But we don't want to exclude anybody at this point. So we take males, we take females, gay, lesbian, transgender, we take anybody, so we had to pull away from that name. The way I like to remember the acronym now is the journey begins with safety is a better way to remember JBWS than the way it used to be. So we are all inclusive. Everyone is welcome. Anyone who's experiencing abuse are welcome to our services. And we also have a batterers intervention program. It's called the ACT program, ACT. We also have a female batterers intervention program. It's called VISTA. It's for women who use force. We also have a 24-hour helpline, which I'll put into the chat. We have counseling service, shelter, legal assistance. We have advocates who respond to police stations and to hospitals to help victims in crisis navigate that system with support. And we are available 24/7. There is no time, no holiday, no day that we take off that we aren't available to help victims of abuse.
I love the acronym Journey Begins with Safety. I love that because now I will remember, because I've been around long enough that I know the old, and that's always what I think. So I think that's fabulous. Argelis, tell me about the Center for Hope and Safety.
Yes, so Center for Hope and Safety is a designated domestic violence agency for Bergen County. We also have a 24-hour hotline that I will be inputting into the chat, our website, and different services that we provide, 24-hour care within our shelter. We also have a compliance with hotel stays for clients where the shelter is either full or if they are fully employed. And especially has been very helpful now with COVID. Families with children have been staying in the hotel connection, so to minimize contamination as the kids are going physically into school. We also have a traditional housing program for clients exiting that shelter process. We have child therapy, 2 forms of child therapy services. One that's called Creative Arts Connections, which is art therapy for children actively in the shelter program. And we also have another child therapy program called Project Child, which is after they have been released from the shelter and are now integrated into the community, and for children who still need to hone in and focus on that past trauma. We also have our legal team with legal representation, paralegals, and lawyers. We have our community services department where I'm the supervisor, where we assist all clients that have exited and are reintegrated into the community. And I think that's all we do.
That's a whole lot.
A lot, yeah.
All 3 of them are
thank-
doing amazing work.
Yes,
Amazing work, all 3 of them.
it's fantastic.
Yes,
Um,
it's a lot.
yeah. So we're really so happy that you guys could take the time, especially this month where this is an awareness month. I know you're busy. You're trying to get the word out. It's wonderful that you've been able to join us tonight. I'd like to open it up for questions from our group that's here tonight. There's a lot to be said, I'm sure. So if anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment or anything, please do so.
Hi, I'm Stacy.
Nice.
Hi, I come from Dress for Success. I was a graduate of Coach Willard's, and prior, which was a great experience for me. I'm also a Habitat for Humanity homeowner. Yay!
Yes,
So-
you are.
I just wanted to say, I'm a survivor, I guess, of domestic violence. It was a little bit prior-ish to Dress for Success, but kind of transitioning, which helped me get stronger. I just want to say, when I first reached out for assistance and help, I actually didn't get it. It was, I had to wait like a 24-hour or 48-hour. This was pre-COVID, all that, like way before, a long time ago. And I don't know, I felt like if I had a call the day before, I might have got more help. I don't know. I didn't understand it. So I had to learn to pull my own bootstraps up. And some people not strong enough to do that. And I just want to say, if anybody ever call or want to reach out, if they made that call, I feel like programs or anybody should be able to just switch them out that situation, because that's what they want. They want to be taken out. It's not wait till tomorrow, because they may not see tomorrow. That's all I ask, is that when y'all do that, please. It's just happened to be, I didn't tell nobody in my family, but when I let a certain person know in my family, then it was like, get it together, get strong, this for your babies, and you gotta do what you gotta do. So that was my situation then. I have 6 children, they're grown now, which thank goodness, yay. But I just say, when somebody reach out, please don't tell them, wait till the next day or something like that, because they may, they may not see the next day. I'm just saying, they may not be strong enough to see the next day.
You're right.
That's what I ask. I'm saying, but I'm glad I'm here. So
Thank you. We are too. You are just such a strong woman in so many ways. And I hope that other women find the strength that you found to do all that you've done. And you've got those beautiful kids. You're in a much better place.
Way better. Yes.
I know your journey hasn't been easy. But what I love is that you want to make it better for somebody else. And you want to help lift another woman up so that she doesn't go through what you went through to get the help. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
No problem.
All right.
Anyone else here want to say something or ask a question?
Don't be shy.
Okay, I have a question. Do you have Facebook pages, or have you thought of social media to help get the word out? Even TikTok. I've seen some TikToks out there that people could forward information. Twitter, Instagram. I don't know if you have those type of
We do.
information channels.
Yeah, JBWS has all of that. We have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have Facebook. Yes, yep. Yeah, that's a bandwagon we all had to jump on, right, everybody?
It's interesting. I just wonder, how do you get that message out there?
This is Kim from Daisy. Like Robin, we use all of the social networking channels as well. In fact, we recently had a TikTok challenge to try to get people to talk about consent. So, it's always hard, of course, to get followers for some of these sensitive topics, but we look to either people who use our services, our donors, our volunteers to kind of start that movement of sharing.
That's interesting. If you have one place that are all of your social media channels listed on your websites?
Yes.
I'd love to share the information. That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah, ours is, yes, on our page, on our website, yes. And if they just put in JBWS, it comes up right away on every social media.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Good to know.
Thank you. Anyone
Hey,
else?
Debbie.
Yeah, I apologize for having to dial in late, so I missed the first half, and maybe you talked about this, but my sister was a victim of domestic violence, and she and I did not live, we lived half a country apart from one another in the US, so I couldn't go to her and physically extract her, but we were in constant communication, but she would just not leave. She would not leave her husband until he threw her up against a brick wall and she sustained a concussion. And then she left. And because we had been talking about places where she could go, she knew where to go. What can you do, especially if you don't live in that place, in the same place as somebody who's experiencing this? What words of advice can you give? Is there to convince someone, that they need to leave the situation? And of course, it's very difficult, but what is your experience, how you can convince someone of this now?
I can talk about this a little bit. I just wanted your word convince. That is a tough word because everybody's path is different and everybody's tolerance threshold is different. And if you put somebody in a position where they leave too soon, it could put them at greater risk. I mean, it's about information. It's about giving resources. It's about looking, okay, you're a country away, to look up agencies in that area that when they're free, they can connect with to build up their repertoire of services to be able to leave safely. It's about leaving safely. Sometimes if we push people too hard to get out or just come in and want to swoop them up and take them out, we could put them at greater risk because we know when they first leave is the most dangerous time for a victim, but they know better, right? I wish we could swoop in and take everybody and keep them safe. But truly they have to make those decisions based on information and based on a safety plan around getting out safely, right? And that sometimes takes time. It doesn't happen in the moment. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it happens spur of the moment and they wind up on this slalom to get out, right? But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have to respect that they will find their way with resources that you're able to give them along the way to build up their courage and their safety plan to get out safely.
Thank you.
anyone else feel comfortable adding or asking a question?
Just one thing that I wanted to add, definitely agree with Robin 100%. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that for most victims of domestic violence, leaving is the most dangerous time for them. So it is very important that if they are considering doing that, that they do have a very comprehensive safety plan, because we know that most women in domestic violence situations are killed at the time of leaving. That's the most dangerous point for them. So like Robin said, as much as you want to like go in and say, let's do this now, sometimes there needs to be a much longer process in order for them to be able to do that safely.
Makes sense.
Hi, to Kim and Robin. I understand that. I do. I get that. With the transition though, if they do want to get out, and if it does take a moment, how do you contact them? Because you know, if the person that's abusing them, you know, whether it's male or female, that's abusing them mentally or physically, especially physically, how would you reach out without the other person finding out? Do you have some type of safety measures in place, or do you tell the person how to contact you every so many days? I don't know. I just want to know, because it's like some situations are worse than others. That's why I asked.
Can I share a secret trick I always use with victims? This has been very effective. Like you said, sometimes victims can't leave with any information because they're going back to that environment because they're not ready, right? But I want them to have that information at a moment's notice that they can call for help. So what I tell victims to do is take a piece of scrap paper, write down the helpline phone number as if it's a math problem. So say it's Bergen $2.01, $3.82, $47.60. And they know that those digits, the first 10 digits, are actually a number that they can call when they're free and when they're out of that environment, that they can call for help anytime. But it's not a catalyst for a problem with their abuser, because it looks like you were online at CVS trying to see if you could afford everything on your list. So total it as a math problem. And then you have that resource. All of that information is one phone call away when you're safe to make that call. That is a trick that I use all the time to keep people safe, because sometimes it's not safe for them to have that information on them, right? It's not a safe, number to have. It's not for a batterer to see that you're trying to move forward and get out of an abusive relationship. You have to be creative thinking to try to get a plan in place. And that's one that I use quite often.
That is very creative and very good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I just want to say something really quick. I'm a survivor from the 90s and from domestic violence. And I did not leave. I tried to leave twice, and my mother actually told me where I was. And I ended up going back home, but I ended up going for counseling at JBWS. If it hadn't been for JBWS, I don't know where I'd be. And the police took him out of the house. So that was like, I guess, a different angle. And actually, I remember so blatantly how 5 Butler cops came into my apartment and literally dragged him out. And then they came back and searched the house and found 2 loaded guns.
Oh.
And yeah, the whole, I can remember as clear as day how, everything. My daughter, I remember being thrown into the bathtub with my daughter in the shower and she getting hurt and she trying to get out to call 911 and he taking the phone. But, through the years, I've healed from that. Through the years, unfortunately, he did pass away from alcohol. But I just think it's a whole different angle, I guess, because the police came. But years ago, I remember there wasn't a lot of help. I can remember trying to call the police, and they always, like the old-fashioned way, they took them for a walk at first. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is only in the 90s. But if I hadn't found JBWS, I don't know where I probably wouldn't be here, because they stayed with me through the whole thing, even through the restraining orders, putting them on, putting them off, meeting me at the police station. I mean, and that just, I just had to say that. So, I mean, it's been a long time. So,
And that's a testament to the progress that all of the agencies have made through time, but we have so much further to go. Because you're right, it was
Yeah.
just 10 years ago, they didn't have advocates that go to police stations. They didn't have a lot of the services we have now. And the education has increased and the awareness has increased, but we still have so much more work to do, even though we've come so far. And I'm anyone who shared their story today, how honored I am to know your story and your history and how brave and courageous all of you are.
Thank you, Jean.
I remember having a conversation with my dad about why he was a batterer. Because I thought it was important to know what was the trigger, what things that he had seen, and why did he think that it was okay? Because I needed to heal. I needed to heal. And I had to, and I needed to forgive him and understand. And as it found out, my father suffered from PTSD from World War II. And plus he was raised in a culture where men beat women on a regular basis if they did not do what they were told. So he saw it from his own mother being abused, and that pattern was okay. And as as we got older and we had the conversation, he was very regretful for that. But I think, we talked about, we need to have a conversation. We need to have a conversation with the batterers too, to change behavior, we're telling the daughters to do what they do, but we need to get in line with the batterers and that it's not okay. And that it's not acceptable, So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Willa.
You're welcome. Yep.
Would anyone else like to add anything before we close out the evening? I think we've all learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel very blessed for those of you who are survivors or who know survivors who have shared so openly your story, because that in itself is not easy to do. So thank you for that. I can't thank our panelists enough. We needed to hear this discussion. We needed to have it. We need to do a whole lot more. I know, speaking for the organization, I look forward to continuing to find ways that we can partner together to do more, to train, to recognize, to support the women who may or may not share with us what they're going through, but just so that we're a little bit more sensitive to it and we know what to do to make it better. So on that note, I just want to thank everybody for joining tonight. Our next fireside chat will be in November. You're all welcome to attend at any time. You can invite friends. We love to have these discussions where we're learning, we're expressing ourselves, and we're figuring out how to be better people and a better organization. So I thank you for that. And if nobody else has anything else to add, I'd just like to say good night. And thank you all again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Have a
Robin.
good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Hey, Kim, I'm still
Yeah.
here. I'm still
Okay.
here.
Okay.
Yep. All right. See, it wasn't bad.
No, I changed. I got my purple on. Thank you.
Yeah. I happened,
Thank you.
somebody sent it to me and I go, oh, purple. That's right. And it would have been crazy. They didn't have purple on, but it was just our luck. They would have had purple on and we didn't.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
So I appreciate that.
No problem.
You look
How's
beautiful.
the
How'd
hacking?
the x-ray go?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's tomorrow. They'll tell me tomorrow when I see him. I have
All
a
right.
doctor's appointment tomorrow morning. They're going to check the lump And then and then they take my blood, and they'll tell me tomorrow, whatever.
Oh, wait, you know what? Hold on a second. Let me stop this recording.